My parents called 911 to report a kidnapping while I sat sipping a latte in my new apartment, over 10 miles away, when my father screamed that I was punishing them. I replied calmly, "No, this is just what it feels like when you no longer have a key to my life." They assumed a stranger had broken in, never realizing the only people who had ever truly broken into my life were them. My name is Ruby Jenkins, and for the first time in 27 years, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, and nobody else knows where that is. The silence in my new kitchen was thick, heavy, and delicious. It did not smell like the lemon furniture polish my mother, Elaine, favored, nor did it smell like the old, dusty pine of the house I grew up in. It smelled of fresh paint, sea salt, and the vanilla latte steaming in the mug cupped between my hands. It was 7 o'clock in the evening, the time when I would usually be bracing myself for a text message asking why my living room blinds were open or why I had bought the wrong brand of dish soap, but tonight, the air was still. The only disturbance came from the object vibrating violently against the quartz countertop. My phone was having a seizure. The screen lit up the dim room with a rhythmic, frantic pulsing. Mom, Dad, Mom, Dad, Mom. The names flashed in an alternating stroboscopic pattern of panic. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the heat burn the roof of my mouth just enough to remind me I was real. I looked at the notification count. 32 missed calls, 14 text messages, and the voicemails were stacking up like planes unable to land in a storm. It is a strange sensation to watch a catastrophe unfold from the safety of a soundproof booth. That was what this felt like. I was sitting in the eye of the hurricane, while 10 miles away, at the Riverside Commons apartment complex, the storm was tearing the roof off. I reached out, my hand steadier than it had been in years, and tapped the voicemail icon. I did not put it on speaker. I wanted this to be intimate. I wanted to hear the frequency of their fear right against my ear. The first message was from 20 minutes ago. Ruby, pick up the phone. It was my mother, Elaine. Her voice was pitched so high it cracked, a sound I associated with broken heirloom plates or social embarrassments at church. "We are at your apartment. We, Ruby. Everything is gone. The door was unlocked. We came in and, oh God, it is empty. There is nothing here. No furniture, no clothes. Ruby, call me now. Please, God, call me." Background noise. The sound of closet doors being ripped open. The distinctive squeak of the pantry hinge. I deleted the message. I took another sip of coffee. The caffeine hummed in my veins, sharpening the edges of the room. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, but it was not the freezing cold of fear. It was the cooling of lava, the hardening of rock. It was a lack of feeling that felt essentially like armor. I played the second message. This one was recorded 4 minutes later. "This is ridiculous," my father's voice barked. "Martin," he sounded breathless, likely from pacing the length of my former living room. "I am calling the police. Ruby, if you are there, if you are hurt, listen to me. Whoever did this is going to pay. Harlan. Where is that incompetent landlord, Harlan?" The phone muffled as he evidently pulled it away from his face to scream at someone in the hallway. Then he was back, his breathing ragged. "Someone broke in. They cleaned the place out. It is those thugs from the downtown district. I told you this area was not safe. I told you, pick up the phone. Damn it." He did not sound like a father worried about his daughter's soul. He sounded like a property manager whose asset had been mishandled. The audio cut off with a harsh beep. I set the phone down. Face up this time, watching the screen go dark. They truly believed I had been kidnapped, or robbed, or worse. In Martin and Elaine's world, there were only 2 possibilities for my absence. Either I was dutifully waiting for them, or something criminal had happened to me. The idea that I, Ruby Jenkins, the quiet girl who never missed a curfew without apologizing 3 times, the woman who let her mother reorganize her underwear drawer at age 25, had simply chosen to leave. That was not a variable in their equation. It was a mathematical impossibility. A dark, twisted amusement curled in my stomach. It was satisfying. I know I'm not supposed to say that. Good daughters are not supposed to feel satisfaction at their parents' terror. But then, good parents are not supposed to make their children fantasize about disappearing. For a moment, the new apartment faded, and I was back in the old one. My memory superimposed itself over the blank white walls of my new kitchen. I remembered a Tuesday 3 months ago. I had come home from a grueling 10-hour shift at Redwood Insight Group, my brain fried from data analysis. I had unlocked my door, desperate for silence, only to find the air conditioning blasting at 65 degrees. I never set it below 72. I had walked into the kitchen to find a pan of lasagna sitting in the center of the fridge, uncovered, sweating condensation onto the glass shelf. A note was taped to the milk carton. "You looked thin last Sunday. Eat." I had not given them a key. I had taken my key back 2 weeks prior, but they had made a copy. Of course they had. "We just want to make sure you are eating," Elaine had said when I called her, her voice dripping with that weaponized sweetness. "Why are you so defensive? Most children would kill for a home-cooked meal." And then there was the time I woke up on a Saturday morning to the sound of scratching at my window. I lived on the first floor. I had pulled back the curtains, heart hammering, ready to scream for the police. It was Martin. He was outside, testing the resistance of the window frame with a screwdriver. When I opened the window, furious and trembling in my pajamas, he didn't even look up. "This latch is loose," he had said, not greeting me. "Anyone could get in here. I am fixing it. You can thank me later." He was checking the windows like he owned the place, like I was just a squatter in his investment. He was securing the perimeter, not to keep bad guys out, but to keep his possession me safe and contained. No secrets in this house. That was the motto. I looked back at my phone. The screen lit up again. Mom. I could picture them right now. They would be standing in the center of that hollowed-out living room at Riverside Commons. The afternoon sun would be hitting the dust motes dancing in the air, the dust that was settled because I had moved the last box out 48 hours ago. Elaine would be crying, that frantic, hyperventilating weep she used to get what she wanted. She would be clutching her chest, looking around at the bare walls where she had hung a picture of Jesus that I hated. The picture was gone. I had donated it to Goodwill yesterday. Martin would be red-faced, veins bulging in his neck, screaming at Mr. Harlan, the landlord. He would be demanding security footage. He would be threatening lawsuits. He would be looking for broken glass, for forced entry, for any sign of the violence he was convinced the world wanted to inflict on his daughter. He would not find any broken glass. He would not find a scratched lock, because the only people who ever broke locks in my life were them. The irony was suffocating. They were panicking because they thought I had lost control of my life. They were screaming because they thought someone had taken me. They could not conceive that for the first time in history, I was the one holding the wheel. I imagined the police arriving. I imagined the confusion on the officers' faces when they saw no signs of struggle. I imagined the moment the narrative would start to shift, when the evidence would point not to an abduction, but to an evacuation. But not yet. Right now, in this hour, they were drowning in the very scenario they had used to terrorize me for years. The world is dangerous. Ruby, you are not safe without us. Ruby. Well, I was gone, and I was safe, and I was without them. I picked up the phone again. My thumb hovered over the green button. It would be so easy. It would be the reflex action of a lifetime of conditioning. One tap. Mom, I'm here. I'm okay. I could stop her tears. I could lower Martin's blood pressure. I could be the good girl. I could explain that I just moved, that I needed space, that it was a misunderstanding. But I knew what would happen if I did. If I answered, the narrative would snap back to their version of reality. I would be the ungrateful, erratic daughter who caused a scene. They would rush to my new location however they managed to force the address out of me, and they would forgive me for scaring them while simultaneously installing new locks that they held the keys to. The dynamic would reset. The cage would just get bigger. But the bars would be reinforced. No, I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail again. Then, I did something I had never done. I powered it down. I watched the Apple logo fade into blackness. The room went silent. The vibration stopped. I placed the phone face down on the polished wood of my new kitchen table. For years, silence had been my punishment. When I displeased them, the house went quiet. When I tried to set a boundary, I was given the cold shoulder until I broke. Silence was the weapon they used to make me feel small, isolated, and desperate for their approval. Tonight, the silence was mine. It was heavy. Yes, it felt dangerous, like holding a loaded gun for the first time. But it was mine. I stood up and walked to the window of my new apartment. It was on the 12th floor of the Silver Line Tower. I looked out at the city lights, a sprawling grid of amber and white. Down there, somewhere in the distance, sirens were likely wailing, racing toward an empty apartment to investigate a crime that had not happened. You might think I am cruel. I can hear the accusation in your thoughts. You are thinking, how can she let her parents suffer like that? They think she is dead. That is torture. I used to think that way too. I used to think that love meant never causing discomfort. I used to think that obedience was the currency I had to pay to be a good person. But you have to understand something. You have not seen the camera hidden in the smoke detector above my bed. You have not felt the suffocating weight of a mother who reads your diary and calls it protection. You have not had a father who tracks your location like you are a stolen vehicle. You will think I am a monster for letting them sweat in that empty room. But wait. Wait until you see the footage. Wait until you see the logs. I turned away from the window and looked at the black rectangle of my phone on the table. It was just a piece of glass and metal. But right now, it was the wall between my past and my future. I washed my coffee mug in the sink, taking my time, feeling the warm, soapy water on my hands. I dried it and placed it in the cupboard. My cupboard. Organized my way. I was not punishing them. Punishment implies I wanted to teach them a lesson so they would behave better next time. I knew better than that. They would not learn. They would not change. This was not punishment. This was an eviction notice. I walked over to the light switch and flicked it off, bathing the kitchen in darkness, illuminated only by the city glow from outside. I felt a strange, terrifying thrill run up my spine. It was the thrill of the fugitive, the exhilaration of the escape artist who has just slipped the handcuffs while the audience is still watching the box. The day they stood panicking in my empty apartment, screaming at ghosts, was the day I finally understood the truth. All their lives, they had used fear to bind me to them. They had manufactured monsters to keep me running into their arms. But tonight, the monsters were real, and they were in my parents' heads. I smiled in the dark. The day they panicked in the empty apartment was the day I knew highly. The fear had changed directions. To understand why silence is now my weapon of choice, you have to understand where I came from. You have to walk down the tree-lined streets of Maple Ridge, a suburb so aggressively peaceful that it felt like a film set where the director had forgotten to yell cut. It was a place where the American flag snapped crisply on every front porch, where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and where neighbors did not just wave, they watched. Maple Ridge was located just outside a major Midwestern city, close enough to see the smog on the horizon, but far enough to pretend the gritty reality of the world did not exist. It was the kind of place where people left their garage doors open on Saturdays to display their organized tool benches, a signal of moral fortitude. Elaine and Martin Jenkins were the undisputed royalty of this ecosystem. To the outside world, my parents were the gold standard. They were the model parents every teacher wished for and every other parent secretly resented. They never missed a parent-teacher conference. They volunteered for every bake sale, their brownies always wrapped in cellophane with color-coordinated ribbons. At church on Sundays, we took up an entire pew, polished and presentable, singing hymns in perfect unison. Martin was a deacon. Elaine ran the charity drive. If you asked anyone on our block, they would tell you that Ruby and Logan Jenkins were the luckiest children in the zip code. But inside the house, the definition of model shifted. It became something sharper, something that cut without drawing blood. In our house, love was not a feeling. It was a surveillance system. The architecture of my childhood was defined by visibility. There were no shadows in the Jenkins household, and certainly no locked doors. The rule was absolute and unspoken until it was challenged. My bedroom door was to remain ajar at all times, just a crack, just enough for a line of sight. At night, before I could retreat to that semi-private space, there was the ritual of the kitchen counter. At 9 o'clock sharp, my phone had to be placed on the charging dock next to the coffee maker. It was not about charging the battery, it was about surrendering the connection to the outside world. "Nothing good happens after 9 o'clock, Martin would say, tapping the counter with his index finger. "Rest your mind, Ruby." I would lay the phone down, feeling a phantom limb sensation as I walked away. I knew that as soon as I went upstairs, the screen would light up, and Elaine would be scrolling. She would read every text, check every browser history log, and analyze every emoji usage. She called it spot checking. I called it suffocation. The turning point. The moment I realized I was not living in a home but in a facility happened when I was 14 years old. It was a Tuesday. I had argued with a friend at school. A trivial spat that felt like the end of the world at that age. I just wanted to cry without an audience. I wanted to be ugly and messy and alone. When I went to my room, I pushed the door shut. It did not lock. We did not have locks on the interior doors, but the latch clicked. 2 minutes later, the handle turned. Elaine. "Ruby, why is this shut?" "I am changing," I lied, wiping my eyes. "Open it when you are done." Immediately, I did not open it. Instead, fueled by a sudden, desperate need for autonomy, I grabbed a heavy wooden dining chair I had dragged into my room for homework. I wedged the back of the chair firmly under the doorknob. When she tried to open it again, the door held. "Ruby," her voice went up an octave. "Ruby, the door is stuck." "I just want to be alone," I screamed. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice like that. The pounding started. Not panicked pounding, but angry. Rhythmic thuds. "Open this door, now!" I sat on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, watching the doorknob jiggle violently against the resistance of the chair. It felt like a siege. I stayed there for an hour, terrified and exhilarated, until eventually, the house went silent. I fell asleep with the chair still wedged in place, feeling like I had won a great victory. The next morning, I went to school early to avoid the tension. When I came home that afternoon, the house was quiet. I walked up the stairs, my backpack heavy on my shoulders, and turned toward my room. I reached out to grab the doorknob, but my hand grasped nothing but air. I froze. The brass knob was gone. In its place was a jagged, circular hole through the wood, revealing the pink carpet of my bedroom on the other side. Martin walked out of the master bedroom. He was holding a screwdriver. He did not look angry. He looked calm, almost bored, like he had just tightened a loose faucet. "We do not have barriers in this family. Ruby," he said, his voice level, "if you feel the need to lock us out, then you clearly have something to hide, and there are no secrets in this house." He didn't yell. He didn't ground me. He just took the hardware. For the next 4 years, I lived with a hole in my door. I had to dress in the corner of the room, huddled behind the closet door for cover. Any sound from the hallway a footstep, a cough made me freeze. I could see them walking past through the hole, and I knew they could see me. It was not just the physical space, it was the mental space. Elaine felt she had a divine right to my thoughts. She would clean my room when I was at school, a task she performed with the thoroughness of a forensic investigator. I would come home to find my journals rearranged. "I read your entry about the math teacher," she said once while chopping carrots for dinner. "You sounded disrespectful. We raised you better than to mock authority." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That is private. Mom, that is my diary." "Private." She stopped chopping and looked at me, the knife hovering over the cutting board. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terrifying innocence. "Ruby, I am your mother. I have to know what is in your heart to protect you. If you are writing things you are ashamed of, that is the problem, not me reading them." My anger, my sense of violation, was always dismissed. If I cried, I was being dramatic. If I argued, I was being disrespectful. If I went silent, I was being sullen. "It is just teenage drama," Martin would say to the neighbors while washing the car, chuckling as if I were a quirky sitcom character. "You know how girls are." But it was not how girls were, it was how prisoners were. The injustice became sharper when I looked at Logan. My brother was 2 years younger than me, but the rules that bound me seemed to dissolve when they touched him. Logan's door had a knob. Logan's door could be shut. When Logan was 16, he was allowed to go on a camping trip with his friends for a weekend. No parents, just boys in the woods. "Boys need adventure," Martin explained when I pointed out the discrepancy. "They need to learn self-reliance." "I need self-reliance," I argued. I was 18 then, a senior in high school. "I want to go on the senior trip to Chicago." "That is different," Elaine said, smoothing the tablecloth. "A city is dangerous for a young woman. You are precious, Ruby. We have to keep you safe. Logan can handle himself. You are a target." I looked between them. "So he gets freedom because he is a boy, and I get a cage because I am a girl." "It is not a cage," Martin snapped, his patience fraying. "It is a fortress." "Do you have any idea how much money we spend to keep you safe? The alarm system, the tuition for that private school, the clothes on your back. You talk about freedom like you are oppressed, but you live like a princess." That was their trump card, the ledger of debt. Every time I tried to draw a boundary, they pulled out the receipt. They had fed me. They had clothed me. They had driven me to piano lessons. Therefore, they owned me. To ask for privacy was to declare ingratitude for their sacrifice. I learned to stop asking. I learned to stop arguing. I learned that the only way to survive was to become boring. I stopped writing in my diary. I stopped talking about my real feelings at the dinner table. I became a mirror, reflecting back exactly what they wanted to see: a good, obedient, grateful daughter. But inside, I was building a different kind of fortress. I remember the night of my 16th birthday. I was lying in bed, staring at the circle of light coming through the hole in my door from the hallway lamp. I could hear the television downstairs, Fox News, Martin's nightly ritual. I pulled the blankets up to my chin and whispered into the pillow, so quietly that even the microphones they probably hadn't installed yet couldn't pick it up. "One day," I promised myself, "one day, I will have a door that only I have the key to, and I will lock it, and I will never, ever open it unless I want to." That promise became my spine. It held me upright through college, where I chose a university only 40 minutes away because they threatened to cut off funding if I went out of state. It held me upright through the weekends I was forced to come home to reconnect. And it was that promise that drove me to study data analytics. I needed a job that paid well. I needed a job that was in high demand. I needed financial independence, because I knew that in the Jenkins family, money was the chain. If I wanted to break the chain, I had to buy my own freedom. Transitioning to age 27 felt like waking up from a long, suffocating dream. When I landed the position at Redwood Insight Group, a prestigious firm in the heart of the city, I felt the weight lift. The salary was good, more than good. It was enough to rent an apartment in the city Riverside Commons. It was enough to pay my own bills. I remember sitting at my new desk on the 22nd floor of the Redwood building, looking out at the skyline. I had my own ID badge. I had a computer password only I knew. I had a bank account in my name only. I thought I had escaped. I thought the geography was the problem. I thought that by moving 30 miles away from Maple Ridge, by signing a lease, by becoming a tax-paying adult, I had fulfilled the vow I made at 16. I thought the hole in the door was gone. I did not realize then that they had simply moved the hole. They had packed it up, carried it across the city lines, and were waiting for the moment to drill it into my new life. I thought I was free because I held the key to my apartment. I was naive. I did not yet understand that to people like Elaine and Martin, a key was not a tool for privacy. It was just another obstacle to be overcome in the name of love. Riverside Commons was not a luxury building. It was a 4-story block of red brick that had likely been standing since the industrial boom. situated on a street where the trees were sparse but the energy was dense. To anyone else, it might have looked weary, with its fire escapes clinging to the facade like iron skeletons and the grout crumbling slightly between the bricks. But to me, standing on the sidewalk with a rental van idling behind me, it looked like a castle. The air here was different than in Maple Ridge. It smelled of diesel exhaust, roasted coffee from the shop on the corner, and the damp, earthy scent of the river a few blocks away. It was messy. It was loud. A city bus roared past, its brakes screeching a discordantly beautiful note that signaled I was miles away from the silent, manicured lawns of my childhood. I carried the first box up to the third floor myself. There was no elevator, just a wide, wooden staircase that creaked in a way that felt conversational, like the building was greeting me. When I unlocked door number 3B, the afternoon sun was flooding the living room. The floors were hardwood, scratched from decades of previous tenants' scratches that told stories I didn't know, scratches that weren't scrutinized by my mother's critical eye. For the first hour, I felt a high that was almost chemical. I walked from the small galley kitchen to the bedroom, touching the walls, opening the sash windows to let the city noise pour in. This was mine. The lease had my signature. The rent would come from my bank account, but the fantasy of autonomy was interrupted before I could even unpack a single plate. Ruby, do not put those boxes on the wood without a rug. Elaine's voice cut through the dust motes. You will scratch the finish, and we will never get the deposit back. She swept into the apartment like a general inspecting a barracks. She was armed with a bottle of bleach spray and a roll of paper towels she had brought from home, evidently convinced that city dirt was a more virulent strain than suburban dirt. Martin followed her, carrying a toolkit that looked serious enough to dismantle an engine. I'm going to check the smoke detectors, he announced, bypassing the hello entirely. And these windows, the locks look flimsy. I stood in the center of my living room, holding a box of books, and felt the familiar shrinkage. I was 27 years old. I was a senior data analyst. I managed complex data sets for a living, yet, in their presence, I was 12 again, waiting to be told where to sit. Mom, the place was professionally cleaned, I said, trying to keep my voice light. You don't need to scrub the counters. Professionally cleaned, Elaine scoffed, spraying a mist of chemicals that made my nose sting. By who? Some college student trying to make beer money. Look at this. Ruby. She wiped a spot on the laminate counter and held up the paper towel. It was pristine white. Germs are invisible. That is why they are dangerous. Just like sin. She didn't wait for a response. She began unpacking my kitchen boxes. She didn't ask where I wanted things. She simply decided. The mugs went to the left of the sink. The plates went in the upper cabinet. The silverware was sorted with aggressive precision. She was not just organizing, she was colonizing. She was imprinting her logic onto my space so that even when she left, I would be reaching for a coffee cup and following her design. By 5 o'clock, the apartment was unpacked. It looked organized, sterile, and slightly unfamiliar, like a hotel room I had just checked into. We stood by the front door. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the floor. This was the moment. They were leaving. I was staying. Elaine opened her purse. She dug around past her wallet and her rosary beads until she found a small, silver keychain. Now, she said, her voice dropping to that reasonable, maternal tone that always made me feel guilty for existing. We need to talk about access. My stomach tightened. Access. The spare key, Martin said. Stepping up beside her, he held out his hand, palm open, expectant. We need a copy. I hesitated. The key in my pocket felt heavy, like a talisman I wasn't ready to share. I don't think that is necessary. Dad, the landlord has a master key for emergencies, and I am usually here. The air in the hallway shifted. It became colder. The landlord, Martin let out a sharp, derisive laugh. You trust a stranger named Harlan with your life, but not your own parents. That man looks like he sleeps in his car. Ruby, if there is a fire, or a gas leak, or if you slip in the shower and break your hip, Who is going to come, Harlan? It is just for emergencies, honey, Elaine added, her eyes wide and wet, playing the good cop to Martin's bad cop. Just in case, you are a single woman living alone in the city. We won't come over unannounced. You know that. We just need peace of mind. How can I sleep at night knowing you are locked in here and I can't get to you if you need me? Responsible adults always have a backup plan, Martin recited. A phrase I had heard 10,000 times. I looked at them. I saw the genuine fear in Elaine's eyes, that weaponized anxiety that she wore like a cloak. I saw the rigid set of Martin's jaw, and then I saw the ghost of the girl who had her door handle removed at 14. If I said no, this would become a war. They would not leave. They would argue. They would cry. They would call me ungrateful. They would taint this first night with a screaming match that would echo in this hallway forever. I just wanted them to leave. I wanted the silence. Slowly, hating myself, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the spare key I had been given by the landlord. It was shiny and brass, catching the last of the sunlight. Okay, I whispered, but please call first. Always call first. Of course. Silly, Elaine beamed, snatching the key from my hand before I could change my mind. She dropped it into her purse, the metallic clink sounding like the closing of a cell door. We respect your privacy. We are just your safety net. Martin clapped a hand on my shoulder, squeezing hard enough to bruise. Good girl. You made the smart choice. When the door finally closed behind them, I locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain across. I slid down the door until I hit the floor, burying my face in my knees. I felt like I had just signed a treaty with an occupying force, trading a piece of my sovereignty for a temporary ceasefire. But as the days turned into weeks, the anxiety began to recede. The first month at Riverside Commons was, without hyperbole, the most beautiful month of my life. I established rituals that were entirely my own. I would come home from work at 6, kick off my heels by the door, not in the closet, but right there on the rug, and no one corrected me. I cooked dinner, experimenting with recipes Elaine would have called too spicy or too ethnic. I made curry that smelled up the whole apartment, and I didn't turn on the fan. I discovered that the guy in apartment 3A, a graphic designer named Miguel, played acoustic guitar on his balcony every Tuesday and Thursday evening. He wasn't playing loud rock music. He played flamenco, intricate and soulful fingerpicking that drifted through my open window. It became the soundtrack to my evenings. I would sit on my second-hand sofa, a glass of wine in hand, listening to a stranger make art, and feel a profound sense of belonging. I belonged to myself. I started to believe that maybe the key was just a piece of metal. Maybe they really did just want it for emergencies. They hadn't visited. They called. Sure, every day, but they hadn't shown up. Then, the glitches started. It was subtle at first, so subtle that I thought I was imagining it. I came home one Tuesday to find my throw blanket, a chunky knit gray Afghan, folded on the arm of the sofa. I distinctly remembered leaving it in a heap on the cushions that morning because I had been running late. I stared at the neat square fold. Maybe I folded it without thinking. I told myself, muscle memory. 2 days later, it was the coffee cup. I had left a Starbucks cup on the kitchen island, half full of cold latte, intending to dump it when I got home. When I walked in, the cup was gone. I found it in the dishwasher, rinsed out and placed in the top rack. A chill went up my spine. I stood in the kitchen, my heart rate accelerating. I hadn't put that cup in the dishwasher. I knew I hadn't. I checked the door. Locked. I checked the windows. Locked. I called Elaine. Hey, Mom, I said, trying to sound casual. Did you guys stop by today? Today. Her voice was bright, innocent. No. Honey, Dad is at the hardware store, and I have been at Bible study all afternoon. Why? Oh, nothing. I lied. Just thought I saw a car like yours. You are missing us, she cooed. That is sweet. I hung up, feeling crazy. Was I losing my mind? Was the stress of the new job causing memory lapses? I decided to let it go. I decided to trust their word over my own perception. That is what gaslighting does. It makes your own senses the enemy. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in November. I had had a terrible day at Redwood. The quarterly data review had been a disaster, and my boss had been in a foul mood. I trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, wet and exhausted, dreaming of nothing but a hot shower and a bowl of cereal. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Immediately, the smell hit me. It wasn't the smell of my curry or my vanilla candles. It was the smell of garlic, oregano, and ground beef. It was the smell of my childhood kitchen. I walked into the kitchen, my wet boots squeaking on the floor. There, sitting on the middle shelf of the refrigerator, was a glass casserole dish. It was filled with lasagna, not store-bought, Elaine's lasagna. Taped to the plastic wrap was a note on stationery that had a little teddy bear printed in the corner. You look too thin in your Facebook photos. You work too hard. Eat real food. Love, Mom. I stared at the note. I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel cared for. I felt like someone had walked over my grave. They had been here. They had let themselves in, walked through my living room, opened my fridge, and judged the contents of my life. They had done it while I was at work, unaware. The image of them moving through my space, Elaine, likely critiquing the dust on the baseboards, Martin checking the thermostat settings, made me feel physically ill. The love mom at the bottom of the note felt less like a sign-off and more like a territorial marking. I pulled my phone out. My hands were shaking. I dialed Elaine. She picked up on the second ring. "Did you find it?" She sounded delighted. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling not with gratitude, but with suppressed rage. "You were in my apartment. We just popped in," she said breezily. "We were in the city for an appointment and thought, let's bless Ruby. You never cook proper meals. Honey, we wanted to surprise you." "I gave you that key for emergencies," I stammered. "For fire, for blood, not for lasagna." "Oh, stop it," she laughed, dismissing my tone completely. "It is just dinner. Don't be dramatic." "It is not about the dinner," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "It is about privacy. You can't just walk in here whenever you want. This is my home." "It is our home too, in a way." Martin's voice boomed from the background. He must have been on speaker. "We pay your car insurance, don't we? We are family. Family doesn't have boundaries like that." "I want you to text me," I said, trying to set a line in the sand, however weak. "Next time, if you want to drop something off, you text me first. You ask if it is okay." There was a pause on the line, a heavy, loaded silence. "Wow," Elaine said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You are acting like we are strangers now, like we are solicitors trying to sell you something. We are your parents. Ruby, we wiped your bottom. We sat up with you when you were sick, and now we need an appointment to feed you." "That is not what I said." "It is exactly what you said," Martin interrupted. "You are being ungrateful. Your mother spent 3 hours making that sauce, and this is the thanks she gets." An interrogation. I stood in my dark kitchen, the light from the refrigerator casting a long, grotesque shadow against the wall. I looked at the lasagna. It looked like a trap. "I am just asking for a heads up," I whispered, my energy draining away. "We will pray for you," Elaine said coldly. "You are clearly under a lot of stress if you are lashing out at people who love you." They hung up. I stood there for a long time. I didn't eat the lasagna. I took the entire dish, heavy and warm, and scraped the contents into the trash can. Then I washed the dish, dried it, and put it in the cabinet. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the rain hit the window, the beautiful illusion of the last month dissolved. I realized then that Riverside Commons was not a new chapter. To them, it was just an annex. It was a detached wing of the house in Maple Ridge. In their minds, there was no threshold I could cross that would make me sovereign. I looked at the front door, bolted and chained. It didn't matter. The lock was physical, but the ownership was psychological. That shiny brass key I had placed in Elaine's hand wasn't just a tool to open a deadbolt. It was a permission slip. It was a contract that said, "I am still yours. Come and go as you please." I stared at the ceiling, tears hot in my eyes. I had thought the key was for emergencies. I was wrong. The key was the emergency. If the lasagna incident was a warning shot, what happened on that Friday night in early December was a declaration of war. I walked into my apartment at 6:30. My shoulders knotted with the specific tension that comes from staring at spreadsheets for 9 hours. All I wanted was to collapse onto my sofa, which faced the window, and watch the city lights flicker on while I ate takeout dumplings. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stopped dead. My brain momentarily short-circuited. Unable to process the visual data, I actually stepped back into the hallway to check the number on the door. 3B. Yes, this was my apartment, but it wasn't my home. My living room had been rearranged, completely. The charcoal gray sofa I had carefully positioned to catch the best light was now shoved against the opposite wall, facing the kitchen. My vintage area rug, a find I was incredibly proud of, was rolled up and leaned in the corner like a discarded carcass. In its place lay a fluffy, bright cream carpet that looked like something from a nursery. The gallery wall of abstract prints I had spent a weekend hanging was gone. The walls were bare, leaving behind the ghost-like holes of the nails. Surprise! The voice came from the center of the room. Elaine was standing there, hands on her hips, beaming. In her right hand, she gripped a claw hammer. For a split second, seeing my mother standing in my altered living room holding a weapon, I felt a spike of genuine, primal fear. "Mom!" My voice came out as a whisper. "What did you do?" "I fixed the flow," she announced, gesturing with the hammer. "I was looking at your layout last time we were here, and it just felt so closed off. I saw this arrangement on Pinterest. It is called Open Heart Feng Shui. It encourages family connection." Family connection. I dropped my bag, the sound loud in the quiet room. "Mom, you moved my furniture. You took down my art." That art was depressing. Ruby, all those black and white swirls. It looked like a Rorschach test for a serial killer. "We bought you some lovely landscapes. They are in the trunk." From the bedroom, I heard the whine of a power drill. My stomach dropped. I ran past Elaine, dodging the new cream rug, and burst into my bedroom. Martin was standing on my bed shoes, still on drilling into the brick wall above my headboard. He was installing a heavy oak shelf that I had never seen before. "Dad." "Stop," I screamed. He didn't stop. He finished driving the screw, the noise tearing through the air. Before he looked down at me, he wiped sawdust from his hands onto his pants. "This place has no storage. Ruby," he said, as if commenting on the weather. "You have books piled on the floor. It looks sloppy. Responsible adults have shelving." "I like the books on the floor," I yelled, my voice shaking. "I like my sofa by the window. Why are you doing this?" Martin stepped down from the bed, his weight making the mattress groan. He looked at me with that pitying, condescending expression that made me feel 2 feet tall. "We invested in this place too. You know, that security deposit. We helped with the moving van that makes this a joint venture. We are just protecting our asset." "It is a rental," I argued, tears stinging my eyes. "And I pay the rent. Me, not you." Elaine appeared in the doorway, still holding the hammer. "Oh, Ruby, don't be so territorial. It is ugly. We spent all afternoon doing this for you. Most daughters would be crying tears of gratitude." I looked around the room. My sanctuary, my safe space. It didn't look like mine anymore. It looked like a stage set, a dollhouse where the giant hand of a child had reached down, plucked up the furniture, and rearranged it to suit a game I wasn't playing. "Get out," I said. It was quiet, but I said it. "Excuse me?" Martin's brow furrowed. I said, "Get out. Both of you. Leave the key." Elaine laughed. It was a nervous, tinkling sound. "She is tired. Martin. Low blood sugar. Come on. Let's go get some dinner. We can finish hanging the landscapes tomorrow." "There will be no landscapes," I shrieked. "Get out." They left, but they took the air with them. And they did not leave the key. "We will discuss this when you are rational," Martin had said as he closed the door. I spent that night moving everything back. I dragged the heavy sofa across the floor alone, scratching the hardwood, sweating, crying. I ripped up the cream rug and shoved it into the hall closet. I put my art back up, even though the new holes they had made were still visible. I was trying to reclaim my territory, but the apartment felt tainted. I thought that was the peak. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. The following Wednesday, I was at Redwood Insight Group, deep in a SQL query, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Miguel, my neighbor in 3A. Hey, your folks are in your place again. Thought you were at work. Everything okay? They've been there for like 2 hours. The blood drained from my face. I stared at the screen. 2 hours I was across town. I hadn't asked them to come. I hadn't asked for anything. I typed back, I am at work. I didn't know they were there. Miguel's reply came 3 bubbles later. Yikes. Want me to knock? No. I wrote, I'll handle it. But I didn't handle it. I couldn't leave work. I sat there for the rest of the afternoon, nauseous, imagining what they were doing. Were they reading my mail? Were they smelling my clothes? Were they rearranging the furniture again? When I got home that evening, the apartment was empty, but it wasn't the same. The air felt disturbed. I found the evidence in the bathroom. The toilet seat was up. Martin. And in the kitchen, my coffee canister had been refilled with a cheap brand of hazelnut blend that Elaine liked. They were haunting me. They were ghosts that didn't wait until midnight. They came at noon. With keys, they refused to surrender. The explosion happened 4 days later. I had gone away for a weekend retreat with my department, a team-building exercise at a lodge 2 hours north. I had told my parents I would be away. That was my mistake. I gave them the data point they needed: vacancy. I returned on Sunday evening, exhausted but refreshed. I hauled my bag up the stairs, unlocked my door, and stopped. There were shoes by the door. Not my shoes, not my parents' shoes. A pair of men's loafers and a pair of women's orthopedic sandals. I walked into the living room. Sitting on my sofa, my repositioned sofa, were Mr. and Mrs. Miller. They were a couple from my parents' church, people I had known vaguely since I was a child. They were drinking tea from my mugs. Mrs. Miller looked up and smiled pleasantly. Oh, Ruby, you are back early. I stood there, my brain unable to bridge the gap between reality and hallucination. Mrs. Miller, what are you doing here? Your parents were so kind. Mr. Miller chimed in, setting his mug on my coffee table without a coaster. We had to come into the city for my specialist appointment tomorrow, and you know how expensive the hotels are downtown. Martin said you were away and that you would love to host us. Host you? I choked out. Yes, Mrs. Miller said. We slept in your bed last night. Don't worry. Elaine came by and changed the sheets beforehand. It was very comfortable. I felt the room spin. Strangers. In my bed. My parents had offered up my private sanctuary. My bed. The place where I slept and dreamt and cried. As a free motel for their acquaintances. You need to leave, I said. My voice was flat. Dead. Excuse me? Mrs. Miller's smile faltered. You need to leave. Now. This is my apartment. I did not agree to this. Just then, the front door opened. Elaine and Martin walked in, carrying takeout bags. Oh, Ruby, Elaine chirped, seeing the tension. You are back. We bought extra pot roast for the Millers. Get them out, I said, turning to my parents. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. Get them out of my apartment. Ruby, don't be rude, Martin snapped, his voice dropping to a warning growl. The Millers are guests. We are helping them out. Christian charity. Ruby, look it up. This is not charity, I screamed. This is trespassing. This is breaking and entering. You let strangers sleep in my bed. They are not strangers, Elaine cried. They are fellowship, and we changed the sheets. Why are you making this so dirty? Because it is my home. It is a resource, Martin yelled back, slamming the takeout bag onto the table. God gave you this apartment, and you are hoarding it. You are acting like a spoiled brat. Don't talk to your parents like some lawyer. Ruby, Trespassing. You sound ridiculous. I am not a child, I shouted. I am 27. You wouldn't be 27 with a job at Redwood if it weren't for us. Elaine stepped forward, pulling out the ledger. The eternal debt. We paid for that degree. We drove you to the interview. We prayed for this job. Do not dare create boundaries to push us out of the life we built for you. I looked at them. I looked at the Millers, who were awkwardly gathering their things, looking terrified. I looked at my parents, their faces red with righteous indignation. They truly believed this. They believed my apartment was just an extension of their estate. They believed my privacy was a sin of selfishness. Get out, I whispered. Take your friends, take the pot roast, and get out. It took 20 minutes of screaming, crying, and Martin threatening to write me out of the will, a threat he made bi-monthly. But eventually, the apartment was empty. I locked the door. I slid the chain. But it wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough. They had the key. They would come back when I was at work. They would come back when I was sleeping. I grabbed my purse. I didn't care that it was 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. I didn't care about the cost. I Googled 24-hour locksmith. When the man arrived, a burly guy named Steve with grease under his fingernails, I didn't apologize for the late hour. Change it, I said, and I want a deadbolt that cannot be copied at a hardware store. Boyfriend trouble, Steve asked, as he drilled out the old cylinder. The sound of the drill was violent and beautiful. It sounded like chains breaking. Something like that, I said. I paid him $350. It was the best money I had ever spent. When he handed me the new key, a heavy, square-headed thing that felt substantial in my palm, I felt a wave of relief so potent it nearly knocked me over. I stood inside my door, locking and unlocking the new deadbolt. Click, thud, click, thud. My hands were trembling. I wasn't just changing a lock. I was declaring independence. I was firing the first shot in a revolution. For the next week, there was silence. My phone didn't ring. No one showed up. The key didn't turn in the lock. I started to relax. I thought maybe they had understood. Maybe the scene with the Millers had been embarrassing enough to make them back off. Maybe, just maybe, I had won. The apartment was quiet. My things stayed where I put them. The air smelled only like me. I didn't know it then, but this wasn't peace. It was the deep, pressurized silence of the ocean before a tsunami hits. They weren't accepting my boundary. They were just reloading. The physical lock was changed. The heavy deadbolt I had installed was a cold, solid reassurance against the wood of my door. For the first time in weeks, I slept without wedging a chair under the handle. I foolishly believed that because I had secured the perimeter, I had secured my life. I did not understand yet that walls are no longer the only way to enter a room. The realization began with a glitch. My phone had been draining battery faster than usual. The back of the casing running hot, even when I wasn't using it. On a Tuesday afternoon, sitting at my desk at Redwood Insight Group, I decided to run a diagnostic on the settings. I dug through the privacy menus, looking for an app that might be rogue. My thumb hovered over the Location Services tab. I clicked it, expecting to see the usual suspects maps, weather, a food delivery app. Instead, at the very top of the list, under a subheading labeled Family Sharing, I saw two icons, Mom, Dad, beside their names. The status read, Share indefinitely. The air in the office was climate-controlled to a perfect 70 degrees. But I felt a sudden, drenching sweat break out on my neck. I stared at the screen. I had never authorized this. I had never tapped that button. Then I remembered the night I moved in. Let me set up the Wi-Fi for you. Honey, Martin had said, you know these routers are tricky. He had asked for my phone to test the signal strength. He hadn't been testing the signal. He had been tagging the animal. I sat there, watching the little blue arrow next to their names. It was solid, not outlined. That meant it was actively transmitting. Right now, they could see I was at the office. They could see when I went to the grocery store. They could see how long I stayed at the pharmacy. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put my head between my knees. It wasn't just an invasion. It was a leash, an invisible, digital leash that stretched all the way from my pocket to their kitchen table in Maple Ridge. I wanted to turn it off immediately. My finger trembled over the toggle, but a colder, sharper instinct stopped me. If I turned it off, they would know. They would get a notification. Ruby stopped sharing location, and then the calls would start. The accusations. The, "Why are you hiding?" interrogation. I needed to confirm the depth of the rot before I cut it out. 2 nights later, I went out for drinks with Marcus, a senior analyst on my team. Marcus was everything my parents were not: laid back, tech-savvy, and respectful of personal space. We went to a dive bar 3 blocks from my apartment. I needed the noise. I needed the alcohol. I needed to feel like a normal 27-year-old woman. We stayed out late. I didn't check my phone. I laughed. I vented about work. I drank 3 gin and tonics. I walked into my apartment at exactly 1:58 in the morning. I stumbled a little, taking off my boots, drank a glass of water, and passed out. The phone rang at 7:30 the next morning. "Hello?" I croaked, my head throbbing. "You sound tired," Martin said. There was no greeting, just the observation. "I am tired. Dad, it is early." "Well, that is what happens when you stay out all night," he said. His voice was casual, deceptively light. "Nothing good happens in this city after midnight. Ruby, and 2 in the morning, that is simply reckless. 2 in the morning is when the predators are hunting." I froze. I sat up in bed, the sheets pooling around my waist. I hadn't told him I went out. I hadn't told him when I got home. And 1:58 was close enough to 2 o'clock that the distinction didn't matter. He knew. He wasn't guessing. He was looking at a timestamp. "How do you know what time I got home?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I am your father," he said, avoiding the question with the adeptness of a politician. "I have a 6th sense about your safety. Go back to sleep, Ruby, and next time, be home by 11. He hung up. I stared at the phone. It felt radioactive. That afternoon, I asked Marcus to come over. I didn't tell him the whole story. It was too humiliating to admit that my parents were stalking me like a fugitive, but I told him I suspected my landlord had installed some weird equipment. Marcus arrived with a bag of equipment he used for network testing. He was tall, lanky, and wore a constant expression of curiosity. "So," he said, scanning the living room, "you think the place is bugged?" "I don't know," I said, hugging my arms around myself. "I just feel watched." Marcus swept the room with a radio frequency detector. It beeped near the router, which was normal. It beeped near the smart TV. Then, he raised the wand toward the ceiling in the bedroom. The device began to shriek. Marcus frowned. He stepped up onto my bed, the same bed Mrs. Miller had slept in, and looked closely at the smoke detector. "This is new," he said. "The plastic is white, no dust. My dad installed it," I said. "He said the old one was faulty. He came over a few weeks ago with a toolkit." Marcus twisted the device. It didn't come off the mount the way a standard first alert detector does. He had to use a small screwdriver to pry the casing loose. When the cover popped off, my heart stopped. There was no ionization chamber inside. There was no battery compartment for a 9-volt battery. Instead, wired directly into the building's electricity, was a small, black square, a lens, and next to it, a slot holding a micro SD card. "Ruby," Marcus said, his voice dropping. He looked down at me, his face pale. "This isn't a smoke detector. It's a wide-angle camera. It has night vision." I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt. "Is it broadcasting?" "It has a Wi-Fi chip," Marcus said, examining the circuit board. "But it looks like it is recording locally to the card, too. Probably a backup in case the internet goes down." He pulled the SD card out. "Do you want to see?" "No," I said initially. Then, "Yes." We plugged the card into Marcus's laptop. A folder popped up labeled DCIM. Inside were hundreds of video files, dated and time-stamped. Marcus clicked on one from 3 days ago. The video opened. It was a high-angle, fisheye view of my bedroom. It was in black and white night vision. I was sleeping. I was tossing and turning in my sheets. I watched myself sleep for 10 seconds before I gagged. "Turn it off," I said. Marcus clicked another file. This one was from the daytime. The room was empty. Then, the door opened. Elaine walked in. This was from the day I was at work. The day Miguel had texted me. On the screen, my mother didn't look like a woman dropping off lasagna. She moved with a strange, predatory stealth. She opened my nightstand drawer. She took out my journal. She stood there, right in the center of the frame, reading my private thoughts. She flipped the pages, pausing to read entries, her face impassive. Then she moved to the closet. She riffled through my clothes. She pulled out a dress I had bought, a black slip dress, and held it up, shaking her head in disapproval. She was inventorying me. She was consuming my life. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. "Ruby, you need to call the police." "I can't," I said. The shame was burning me alive. "It's my mother." "This is illegal," Marcus said. "This is a felony in most states. Unlawful surveillance." I took the SD card. I held it in my palm. It was so small, no bigger than a fingernail. But it contained the proof that I was not a person to them. I was a property. I was a specimen in a jar. "Get the camera down," I told Marcus. "Put it in a bag." That Sunday, I went to Maple Ridge for dinner. I didn't bring the pot roast. I brought the SD card. We sat at the mahogany table where I had eaten thousands of meals. Elaine had made meatloaf. Martin was talking about the rising cost of gasoline. I waited until they were both eating. "I found the smoke detector," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. Martin's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Elaine blinked, her face going blank. "The one in the bedroom," I continued, my voice steady, though my hands were gripping the napkin in my lap so hard my knuckles were white. "The one with the lens." Elaine was the first to break. She didn't get angry. She crumbled. It was a performance I had seen 100 times, but this time, the audience wasn't buying it. "Oh, Ruby!" She burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. "We were just so worried. You live in that terrible city. We hear the news. Girls get taken every day. We just wanted to be sure you were safe at night. It was for peace of mind." "You watched me sleep," I said. "You read my journal. I saw you on the video. Mom, you went through my underwear drawer." "I was organizing," she sobbed. "I was looking for drugs. I had to be sure you weren't spiraling." I turned to Martin. He wasn't crying. He was cutting his meatloaf. "And the tracking?" I asked. "The location sharing you hid on my phone." Martin put his knife down. He looked me in the eye, and his expression was terrifying. It wasn't guilt. It was righteousness. "We can't be too careful," he said. "The world is dangerous. Ruby, you are naive. You think because you have a degree and a job that you are immune to tragedy. We are your parents. It is our job to protect you, even if you are too stupid to protect yourself." "I am 27, I said. "This isn't protection. This is stalking." "Stalking?" Martin laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Stalking is what criminals do. We are family. You should be grateful we care enough to watch. Most parents don't give a damn where their kids are. We love you enough to keep eyes on you." "You don't have the right," I said. "I have every right." He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "I made you. I raised you. I paid for that apartment's deposit until you are married and some other man's problem. You are my responsibility." I stood up. "I am not a problem, and I am not yours." I walked out. By the time I got back to my apartment, my camera-free apartment, my phone was blowing up. But it wasn't just them. It was Aunt Sarah. "Your mother called me in tears. She said you accused them of spying Ruby. They love you so much. Don't be so harsh. It was Uncle Bob. Kiddo, cut your dad some slack. He is just an old-school protector. You are breaking their hearts. It was my cousin Jessica, really. You made Aunt Elaine cry over a safety camera. You are being a brat." I looked at the messages. The web was bigger than I thought. They had spun a narrative instantly I was the ungrateful, hysterical daughter, and they were the loving, worried saints. No one asked about the violation. No one asked how it felt to have your father comment on your bedtime from 10 miles away. They were all complicit. The whole family structure was built on the idea that children were property and parents were gods. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop. I didn't go to Facebook. I didn't go to Instagram. I went to a legal database. I typed in the search bar, tenant rights regarding landlord surveillance, state laws on unauthorized video recording, definition of criminal stalking. I read for hours. I learned about expectation of privacy. I learned about two-party consent. I learned that what they had done wasn't just overprotective parenting, it was a Class E felony. I looked at the SD card sitting on my desk. It wasn't just a memory anymore, it was evidence. For the first time, my anger cooled into something hard and sharp. I stopped thinking about how to explain myself to them. I stopped thinking about how to make them understand my feelings. They didn't care about my feelings. I needed to stop thinking like a daughter. I needed to start thinking like a prosecutor. I picked up a pen and a fresh notepad. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the time. I wrote down exactly what Martin had said. You should be grateful we care enough to watch. Then, underneath, I wrote a new list. It wasn't a list of chores. It was a list of leverage. The fear was still there, buzzing in the back of my mind. But as I read the statutes, as I understood the power of the law, the fear began to change shape. It was no longer the fear of a child hiding in a corner. It was the calculated caution of a woman planning an escape. The straw that broke the camel's back was not a single dramatic event like a slap or a scream. It was, fittingly for my life, a grotesquely polite violation disguised as a spiritual intervention. It happened on a Tuesday. I had left Redwood Insight Group at 2:00 in the afternoon, struck down by a migraine that made the spreadsheets dance before my eyes. I had not told anyone I was leaving early. I just wanted to go home, draw the blackout curtains I had rehung after the open heart feng shui disaster, and sleep for 12 hours. When I reached the third-floor landing of Riverside Commons, I heard a low, rhythmic murmuring drifting from down the hall. It sounded like a hive of bees. As I got closer to door 3B, the buzzing resolved into human voices. I stopped. My hand hovered over my bag, searching for my keys, but I realized I didn't need them. The door was unlocked. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with a trembling hand. My living room was full of people. There were 6 of them, arranged in a circle of folding chairs that they must have brought with them, sitting knee to knee in the center of my rug. I recognized them instantly. It was the Tuesday Prayer Warrior group from my parents' church in Maple Ridge. In the center of the circle, kneeling on the floor with her head bowed, was Elaine. Martin stood behind her, his hand resting heavily on her shoulder, his eyes closed, leading the chant. Lord, we ask you to break the spirit of rebellion in this home, Martin intoned, his voice shaking with performative emotion. We ask you to cleanse this apartment of the worldly influences that have hardened our daughter's heart. Bring Ruby back to the fold. Make her docile. Make her pure. Amen, the group chorused. I stood in the doorway, my migraine forgotten, replaced by a cold horror that froze my blood. They were exorcising me. In my own apartment, they were praying away my personality as if it were a demonic possession. Then I looked past the circle. The door to my bedroom was wide open. I took a step forward, the floorboards creaking. Martin's eyes snapped open. He saw me. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked beatific. Ruby, he exclaimed, spreading his arms. You are early. It is a sign. The Lord brought you here to join us. I didn't answer. I walked past the circle, ignoring the stunned faces of the elderly church ladies, and went to my bedroom door. My room had been tossed. That is the only word for it. It looked like a burglary, but organized. My clothes were pulled out of the closet and laid on the bed in piles, keep and donate. But it was the dresser that stopped my heart. My underwear drawer was pulled all the way out and set on top of the dresser. My bras, my panties, My personal items were sorted into neat rows. A trash bag sat on the floor, half filled with the lace thongs and silk camisoles I had bought for myself, things Elaine deemed promiscuous. "We were just doing a spiritual cleansing," Elaine said, appearing at my elbow. She reached out to touch my arm. "A chaotic room leads to a chaotic mind. Ruby, we are helping you purge the darkness." I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt thick, gelatinous. I looked at the trash bag. I looked at the circle of people in my living room. I looked at my mother's face, which was glowing with the terrifying certainty of the righteous. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. My body simply rejected the reality. I turned around, walked out of the bedroom, walked past the prayer circle, walked out the front door, and collapsed on the staircase. My lungs seized. I was gasping for air, but nothing was coming in. My vision tunneled. I sat there on the dirty concrete steps, clutching the railing, making a sound like a dying engine. My phone, clutched in my hand, began to ring. I stared at the screen through my tears. Naomi. Naomi was the project manager at Redwood. She was tough, cynical, and the only person at work I had hinted the truth to. I swiped answer. I couldn't speak. I just wheezed. "Ruby." Naomi's voice was sharp. "I need the Q3 projection numbers. You forgot to Ruby. What is that noise? Are you okay?" "I can't." I gasped. "They are here." "Who is here?" "The parents. Circle praying underwear." "Okay," Naomi said. Her voice shifted instantly from boss to crisis negotiator. "Listen to me. Where are you?" "Stairs." "Stay there. Do not go back inside. Do not talk to them. I am 10 minutes away. I am coming to get you." She was there in 8. I heard her heels clicking furiously on the stairs before I saw her. She found me huddled against the wall, shaking. She didn't ask questions. She pulled me up, wrapped her trench coat around my shoulders, and marched me down to her car. As we pulled away from the curb, I saw Martin stepping out onto the sidewalk, looking around confusedly. Naomi saw him too. She didn't slow down. She accelerated. She didn't take me back to the office. She drove me to a quiet medical building on the north side of the city. "I have an appointment with my therapist in 20 minutes, Naomi said, gripping the steering wheel. "You are taking it. I will pay for the double session." "I don't need a therapist," I managed to whisper, though I was still shivering. "I need a lawyer." "You need both," Naomi said. "But first, you need to understand what is happening to you, because you look like a soldier with shell shock." Dr. Harris was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a spine of steel. She sat in a leather chair, listening as I poured out everything: the keys, the lasagna, the camera, the location tracking, the prayer circle, the trash bag of underwear. I expected her to be shocked. I wanted her to be shocked, but she wasn't. She nodded, taking notes, her face grave but unsurprised. When I finished, silence filled the room. It was a safe silence. "Ruby," Dr. Harris said softly, "have you ever heard the term enmeshment?" I shook my head. "It is a psychological state where boundaries between family members become blurred or non-existent," she explained. "In healthy families, children are encouraged to become individuals. In enmeshed families, individuality is seen as a betrayal. Your parents do not see you as a separate person. They see you as an extension of themselves, an appendage." She leaned forward. "What you are describing is not love. It is control disguised as care. It is a slow, systematic annihilation of your selfhood." "But they think they are helping," I defended weakly. It was a reflex. "They think the world is dangerous." "The world is dangerous," Dr. Harris agreed. "But right now, the most dangerous people in your life are the ones who claim to be protecting you from it." She looked at me over her glasses. "You have been trying to negotiate with them, haven't you? You have been trying to use logic. You have been saying, 'Please respect my privacy,' expecting them to hear you." "Yes." "You cannot teach someone to respect a boundary in a language they do not speak," she said. "They do not speak respect. They speak power. Every time you explain yourself, every time you argue, you are engaging in the dynamic. You are handing them the power to validate or invalidate your feelings. I stared at her. So what do I do? You change the language, she said. You stop using words, you start using action, and you start using distance. Then she asked me the question that changed everything. The question that cut through 27 years of guilt and conditioning. Ruby, she said, imagine you have a daughter. Imagine she is 27. She calls you and tells you that her parents broke into her home, watched her sleep on a hidden camera, and threw away her clothes while praying over her living room floor. What would you tell her to do? The image hit me like a physical blow. I pictured a girl, my imaginary daughter, small and trembling on a staircase. I felt a surge of protective rage so hot it burned my throat. I would tell her to run, I said. The words came out before I could think. I would tell her to run and never look back. Dr. Harris sat back. Then why is her safety more important than yours? That was the moment. The click, the shift, the panic attack receded, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a hostage. I left Dr. Harris's office with a prescription for anxiety medication I probably wouldn't fill and a plan I definitely would execute. I didn't go back to the apartment that night. I stayed on Naomi's couch. I turned my phone off. The next morning, I called in sick to Redwood, but I didn't rest. I went hunting. I needed a fortress. I needed a place where open-heart feng shui was physically impossible because the walls were made of reinforced concrete and the door was guarded by a human bulldog. I found it at Silverline Tower. It was a glass needle rising out of the financial district, 5 miles further away from Maple Ridge than Riverside Commons. It was expensive, painfully so. The rent would eat 40% of my paycheck. I didn't care. I walked into the lobby. It was silent, cool, and smelled of expensive sanitizer. Behind the marble desk sat a man named Caleb. He was 6'4", with shoulders that strained his blazer and eyes that missed nothing. "Can I help you?" he asked, not unkindly, but guardedly. "I am looking for an apartment," I said. "But my priority is security, specifically, guest control." Caleb nodded. "You need a key fob to operate the elevator. You need a key fob to enter the stairwell. Guests have to be announced. If you don't clear them, they don't get past this desk. I don't care if it is the Pope." "What if they say they are my parents?" I asked. "What if they cry? What if they say it is an emergency?" Caleb looked at me. He had been working in this city a long time. He saw the desperation in my eyes. "Ma'am," he said, "unless they have a warrant signed by a judge, or you call down and say send them up, they stay in the lobby. If they make a scene, I call the precinct. That is the policy." I signed the lease an hour later. I put down the deposit with a check that made my hand shake. But it was a good shake. The move-in date was in 4 days. Saturday was perfect. Saturday was the annual silent retreat for the senior members of the Maple Ridge Church. Martin and Elaine would be at a cabin by the lake, stripped of their phones, meditating on their righteousness for 48 hours. It was a window of opportunity sent by a God they claimed to own, but clearly didn't understand. But before I could leave, I had one loose end to tie. I went back to Riverside Commons on Thursday morning. When I knew the prayer circle would be gone, I went straight to the landlord's office on the first floor. Mr. Harlan looked up from his newspaper. He was a soft man, a man who disliked conflict, which made him the perfect clay for Martin to mold. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, looking nervous. "I heard there was some commotion on Tuesday." "Mr. Harlan?" I said, ignoring his stammer. "I am moving out. Moving, but the lease. I will pay the penalty," I said. "But I need to know something. How did my parents get in here on Tuesday? I changed the lock. I have the only key." Mr. Harlan turned red. He fiddled with his glasses. "Well, your father called. He was very upset. He said he was worried about your spiritual health. He said he is listed as the emergency contact." "He is not," I said. "I listed Naomi." "Yes, well," Harlan mumbled. He called a few weeks ago and told me to update the file. He said you forgot. He was very convincing. Ruby, he is a deacon. So you gave him the master key? He said it was an intervention. He said they were going to help you clean. I took a deep breath. My anger was useless here. Harlan was just another casualty of their steamroller. Mr. Harlan, I said, keeping my voice low and terrifyingly even, I am leaving. But until I hand over my keys on Sunday, I am still the legal tenant. I want you to write something down. What? I want a signed document stating that no one, absolutely no one, is allowed access to apartment 3B without my written consent. If you let them in again, if you give them a key, if you even tell them I am home, I will sue you for breach of contract and endangerment, and I will win. Mr. Harlan paled. He grabbed a piece of paper. He wrote it out, his hand shaking. I am sorry, Ruby, he said as he handed it to me. Your father, he just seemed so concerned. He called himself the first emergency contact. He is the emergency, I said. I went back up to my apartment. I began to pack, but I didn't pack like I did when I moved from Maple Ridge. I didn't wrap things in bubble wrap with care. I purged. The cream rug dumpster. The landscapes they bought dumpster. The clothes Elaine had sorted into the keep pile. I looked at them. They were all modest, frumpy, pastel things. I threw them in a bag for goodwill. I only packed what was mine. My books, my dark art, the clothes I bought with my own money. As I taped up the boxes, I felt a strange sensation. I wasn't frantic. I wasn't crying. I felt like a general looking at a map. I created a plan. I called it the Protocol of Silence. I wrote it down in my notebook. 1. No yelling. Yelling proves I am the emotional child. 2. No explanations. Explanations are just opportunities for them to argue. 3. No warning. Warning gives them time to prepare a counterattack. 4. Disappear. I would not tell them I was leaving. I would not give them a chance to block the door, to guilt-trip me, to call the police to stop me from making a mistake. I would simply vanish. I looked at the camera hidden in the smoke detector. I had put it back up, tape over the lens, just so they wouldn't suspect I knew. On Saturday morning, I would take it down. I would wrap it in plastic. It was coming with me, not to be installed, but to be kept. It was the artifact of my oppression. And one day, if I needed to, it would be the weapon of my liberation. The silence in the apartment was deep, but for the first time, it wasn't empty. It was full of anticipation. I was about to do the one thing they never thought me capable of. I was about to grow up, and the first act of adulthood was to leave them behind in the dark. Saturday morning arrived not with a bang, but with the hiss of a hydraulic brake and the smell of high-grade caffeine. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun was just beginning to bruise the horizon, casting a pale gray light over the brick facade of Riverside Commons. The street was empty, save for a stray cat and a white rental van idling softly at the curb. Inside apartment 3B, the atmosphere was less moving day and more covert military extraction. Naomi and Marcus had arrived 10 minutes prior, moving with a silence that was both impressive and slightly terrifying. They wore dark hoodies and sneakers. Naomi carried a tray of coffees from an all-night diner. Marcus carried a roll of industrial packing tape and a look of grim determination. "Okay," Naomi whispered, handing me a cup that radiated heat against my cold palms. "We have a 2-hour window before the neighborhood wakes up and Mrs. Kravitz down the hall starts asking questions. Let's move." We worked in a coordinated hush. There was no casual chatting, no music playing from a Bluetooth speaker. We were smuggling a life out of a prison, box by box. I had spent the previous night packing, but the final purge happened now. I stood in the center of the living room, looking at the piles. On the left were the brown cardboard boxes sealed with tape my clothes, my books, my kitchenware, the things I had bought with my own salary. On the right was the debris of my mother's love. "Are you sure you want to leave this?" Marcus asked, pointing to the heavy floral curtains that hung over the window. They were expensive, custom-made, and hideous. These probably cost a fortune. Leave them, I said, my voice steady. If I take them, she will say I owe her. She will say, I bought you those curtains. I have a right to see how they look in your new place. I am not taking anything that has strings attached. We left the curtains. We left the lace tablecloth that Elaine had insisted made the place look civilized. We left the set of decorative ceramic roosters Martin had placed on top of the kitchen cabinets because he thought they were whimsical. Leaving them felt like shedding a skin. It was wasteful. Perhaps, in a monetary sense, but in a psychological sense, it was essential. I was bankrupting their emotional leverage. Every item I left behind was a receipt I was refusing to sign. Then came the most important task. Marcus, I said, the smoke detector. Marcus dragged the stepladder into the bedroom. He didn't just yank the device down. He put on a pair of latex gloves, a touch of dramatic flair that I actually appreciated, and carefully unscrewed the mounting plate. He lowered the false detector, the one with the black eye of the lens, and handed it to me like it was a piece of radioactive uranium. I looked at it. For weeks, this piece of plastic had been the guardian of my nightmares. It had captured images of me sleeping, changing, living. Now, disconnected from the power source, it looked small and pathetic. Do we smash it? Marcus asked, looking hopeful. He picked up a hammer from the windowsill. No, I said, placing the device gently into a padded Ziploc bag I had prepared. We keep it. If they ever try to call the police on me, or sue me, or claim I am mentally unstable, this is my insurance policy. This is Exhibit A. I sealed the bag. It made a satisfying zip sound. I put it in my personal backpack, the one that would not leave my side. By 7:15, the apartment was stripped. The furniture I owned, the bed frame, the desk, the non-feng shui sofa was already in the van. The room echoed. I took one last look around. The walls were bare, the floor was swept, but I had one last thing to do. I pulled a plain white envelope from my pocket. On the front, I had written, to the future tenant of 3B. I taped it to the kitchen counter, right where it couldn't be missed. Inside, the note was brief. Welcome to your new home. It is a nice apartment with great light. However, please take this advice seriously. Change the locks immediately. Do not trust that previous copies of keys have been returned. And if an older couple named Martin and Elaine shows up claiming to be your emergency contacts or offering to clean for you, do not let them in. Call the police. Trust me. It was the warning I wished someone had left for me. Ruby, Naomi called from the hallway. The van is loaded. We are burning daylight. I walked out the door. I didn't look back. I locked the deadbolt, the one I had paid $350 for, and dropped the key through the mail slot. Clink. The sound of the key hitting the floor on the other side was the period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. The drive to Silverline Tower took 40 minutes. We took a convoluted route, avoiding the highway that led to Maple Ridge, just in case. I sat in the passenger seat of the van, watching the city scroll by. Every mile we put between me and Riverside Commons felt like a physical weight being lifted off my chest. When the glass spire of Silverline Tower came into view, piercing the blue morning sky, I felt a lump in my throat. It looked sterile. It looked corporate. It looked perfect. We pulled into the loading dock. Caleb, the concierge I had met earlier, was waiting with a rolling cart. He wore a uniform that was impeccably pressed. Ms. Jenkins, he nodded. Right on time. Good morning, Caleb, I said. I felt a rush of gratitude for his professionalism. He didn't ask why I looked like a fugitive. He didn't ask why my friends were looking over their shoulders. He just unlocked the freight elevator, while Marcus and Naomi began moving the boxes up to the 12th floor. I stayed in the lobby with Caleb. I pulled a manila folder from my backpack. Caleb, I said, placing 2 8x10 glossy photographs on the high marble counter. They were headshots of Elaine and Martin, taken from the church directory. They looked smiling, wholesome, and harmless. These are my parents, I said. My voice did not waver. Martin and Elaine Jenkins, Caleb studied the photos. Okay. They are not allowed up, I said, leaning in. Under no circumstances. If they show up, they will be charming. My mother might cry. My father might shout or threaten to call your manager. He might say he is worried about my health. He might say he has a delivery for me. I took a breath. It is all a lie. If they show up, you call me first. Do not confirm I live here. Just tell them they cannot pass. If they try to slip past you, Caleb looked up from the photos. His eyes were dark and serious. Ms. Jenkins, I used to work security at a courthouse. I know what a no-contact order looks like. Even if you don't have the paper yet, if they try to slip past me, they will be removed. Physically. I could have hugged him. Thank you. By noon, the move was done. Naomi and Marcus collapsed on my living room floor, eating pizza straight from the box. The apartment was smaller than my old one, but the view was incredible. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city looked like a circuit board. So, Marcus said, wiping tomato sauce from his lip. What about the digital trail? Right, I said. I pulled out my phone. It was an older model iPhone. I had already gone to the carrier store the day before and set up a new plan on a brand new device, a sleek, black Android that sat on the counter. This, I said, holding up the old iPhone, is the quarantine zone. I had ported my main number, the one my friends and work used, to the new Android phone, but I had kept the old carrier plan active on a cheap, pay-as-you-go SIM card I inserted into the old iPhone. I had sent a mass text to my contacts list from the new number. Hey, this is Ruby, new number. Please delete the old one. But I had not sent that text to Elaine, Martin, or anyone with the last name Jenkins. To them. My number was still the old one, the one that was now inside the old iPhone. I am going to keep this one on, I explained to Naomi, turning the old phone over in my hands. But it stays in the drawer, on silent. I will check it once a day. I need to know what they are doing. I need to know the escalation level, but I don't want it in my pocket. Smart, Naomi said. Compartmentalization. They left around 2 in the afternoon, when the door clicked shut behind them. I was alone. The silence in Silverline Tower was different. It was thick and insulated. I couldn't hear the neighbors. I couldn't hear the street. I spent the afternoon unpacking. I put my books on the shelves. I made my bed with new sheets I had bought at Target, plain gray. No floral patterns. I hung my clothes in the closet. As the sun went down, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and charcoal, I sat on my bed. I listened. The central air conditioning was a steady, white noise drone. It was soothing. I looked at the door. I had locked the handle. I had engaged the deadbolt. And because this was a modern building, there was no chain. But there was a heavy steel latch, 3 layers of steel between me and the world. For the first time in my life, the door didn't lead to a hallway where my mother might be lurking with a key. It didn't lead to a porch where my father might be testing the windows. It led to me. Just me. I lay back on the pillows. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions swirling in my gut. Relief. Yes, it tasted like cold water. But underneath it, there was the sharp, acidic burn of guilt. I was a bad daughter. The thought arrived on schedule. What if they get to the old apartment and find it empty? What if Mom has a heart attack? What if Dad strokes out from the rage? My eyes darted to the nightstand. The old iPhone was sitting there. I had put it in the drawer, but I had taken it out, just to check. The screen was dark. I tapped it. My heart skipped a beat. 14 notifications. They had started. I unlocked the phone. The messages were from Elaine. They had clearly finished their silent retreat early, or perhaps they had broken the rules and checked their phones. Elaine. 4:32 p.m. P.m. Honey, are you home from work? Elaine. 5:05 p.m. I saw a recipe for chicken pot pie I thought you would like. Should I send it? Elaine. 6:15 p.m. Ruby. Why aren't you answering, Elaine? 6:20 p.m. Elaine. 6:45 p.m. Your father is asking if you checked the oil in your car. It is getting cold. They didn't know yet. They were still playing the game. They were still casting the fishing line, waiting for the tug. I stared at the sad face emoji. It was so small, so yellow, so manipulative. I could hear her voice. I could feel the pressure to respond, to soothe, to say, "I'm here, Mom. I'm eating." I checked the oil. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. It would be so easy to type back. Just a little hit of dopamine to keep the beast asleep for one more day. No. I pulled my hand back as if the phone had burned me. If I answered, I was back in the cycle. If I answered, I was validating their right to intrude. I reached into my bag and pulled out a notebook. Dr. Harris had suggested this. "When the guilt comes," she had said, "you need facts to fight it. Guilt is an emotion. Facts are reality." I opened the notebook to the first page. I took a black pen and wrote in bold letters the list why I am doing this. The camera. They watched me sleep. They watched me dress. This is a crime. The underwear. They went through my most private items and threw them away like trash. The Millers. They treated my home like a free hotel for strangers. The tracking. They tracked my location 24/7 without my consent. The lasagna. They broke into my home to leave food I didn't ask for, then called me ungrateful. The door handle. Dad took my door handle when I was 14. He never gave it back. The ledger. Love is not a debt to be repaid. I do not owe them my life because they paid for piano lessons. The emergency. There was never an emergency. They were the emergency. The future. If I don't leave now, I will never leave. I will be 50 years old and asking permission to buy a sofa. Self-respect. I deserve to exist without being observed. I read the list, then I read it again. The guilt didn't disappear, but it shrank. It became manageable. I looked at the old iPhone one last time. I didn't turn it off. I needed the record, but I slid the little switch on the side. Silent mode. I put the phone back in the drawer and closed it. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Thousands of lights. Thousands of people living their lives behind locked doors. Tonight, I was finally one of them. "I am not punishing you," I whispered to the glass, imagining my parents' faces. "I am just resigning from the job of being your child." I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. I drank it standing up, in the dark, in the silence. It was the best glass of wine I had ever tasted. The silence held for 4 days. It was a strange, suspended kind of quiet, like the air in a concert hall just before the orchestra strikes the first chord. I went to work at Redwood Insight Group. I came home to Silverline Tower. I ate dinner on my own plates, looked out at my own view, and slept in a bed that no one watched. The quarantine phone, the old iPhone with the number they knew, sat in the bottom drawer of my new desk. Silenced, face down. I checked it once a day, usually at noon, just to ensure the screen remained dark. Sunday passed, Monday passed, Tuesday and Wednesday passed. I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had simply accepted my absence. Perhaps they had gone to the apartment, seen my car gone, and decided to wait. I was naive. The storm broke on Thursday afternoon. I was in a meeting with the marketing team when I felt the vibration. I had foolishly left the old phone in my bag under the table, rather than at home. It buzzed against the leather of my purse. One long vibration, then another, then a rapid-fire series of short, angry pulses that did not stop. It sounded like a frantic insect trapped in a jar. I excused myself, my heart hammering a rhythm that matched the phone, and walked into the ladies' room. I locked the stall door. My hands were shaking as I pulled the device out. The screen was a waterfall of notifications. 20 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 34 text messages. The names flashing on the screen were Mom and Dad. Over and over. A digital assault. I sat on the closed toilet lid, taking deep breaths, trying to steady my pulse. I did not answer. Answering was not part of the protocol. But I had to know. I had to know if they were hurt, or if they had simply found the void I left behind. I pressed play on the first voicemail. It was stamped to 14 p.m. "Ruby?" It was Elaine. She wasn't speaking. She was shrieking. The sound distorted the tiny speaker. "Ruby, pick up. We are at the apartment. Oh my God. Ruby." The door was wide open. "We walked in and everything is gone. Your apartment is empty. Call me now." There was a sound of hyperventilating, a jagged intake of breath that sounded like she was drowning. "Someone took everything," she sobbed. "The furniture, the bed. They even took oh God, Martin, they took the curtains. Ruby, if you can hear this, if you are hurt, please." The message ended. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She sounded terrified. Genuine, animal terror. For a second, the guilt clawed at my throat. I had done this. I had inflicted this panic. Then I remembered the camera in the smoke detector. I remembered the underwear in the trash bag. The guilt receded, replaced by a steely resolve. I played the second message, stamped 2:18 p.m. This was Martin. "This is criminal negligence," he was shouting, not at the phone, but clearly at someone in the room with him. "I am going to sue you. Harlan, you are the landlord. How do you let a gang of movers strip an apartment in broad daylight? My daughter is missing. Do you hear me? She is missing." The phone shuffled, bringing it closer to his mouth. His voice dropped to a menacing growl. "Ruby, listen to me. The police are on their way. Whoever did this, whoever has you, we are going to find them. Do not panic. Daddy is here." I lowered the phone. They had called the police. Of course they had. They couldn't conceive of a world where I left them. So they invented a world where I was stolen. I could picture the scene perfectly, reconstructed from the audio clues and my knowledge of their behavior. They must have arrived at Riverside Commons around 2 o'clock, perhaps with a casserole or a new piece of furniture they insisted I needed. They would have tried the copy I gave them, or the one they bullied Harlan into keeping. It wouldn't have turned. I imagined Martin rattling the handle, getting frustrated, then angry. I imagined them marching down to the first floor, demanding Harlan open the door for an emergency. Harlan, weak-willed Harlan, probably caved under Martin's deacon voice, and then the reveal. They would have pushed past Harlan, expecting to find me sitting on the sofa, or perhaps a messy room they could criticize. Instead, they found a white box, no furniture, no rugs, no trace of Ruby Jenkins, just the nail holes in the walls and the smell of industrial cleaner. They stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the echo of their own footsteps, and faced the one thing they could not control: nothingness. I went back to my desk at work, but I couldn't focus. I kept the phone on my lap, watching the drama unfold in real-time updates. Around 3 o'clock, the tone of the texts changed. "Mom, the police are here. They are asking for your dental records. Ruby, please be alive. Dad Harlan is lying to the officers. He claims you moved. I told them you would never move without telling us. I told them you are vulnerable." Then, at 3:30, my new phone, the Android, the one only a few people had rang. It was an unknown number, local area code. I walked out to the fire escape stairwell to answer. The concrete was cold. "This is Ruby," I said. "Ms. Jenkins?" It was a woman's voice, firm, professional, but not unkind. "This is Detective Miller from the 4th Precinct. I am currently standing in the lobby of Riverside Commons with 2 very distressed individuals who claim to be your parents." "I know," I said. "I am safe. Detective, I am at work." "I figured as much," Detective Miller said. I could hear the weariness in her voice. "Mr. Harlan showed us the lease termination paperwork. It looks like you moved out voluntarily last Saturday. Is that correct?" "Yes, I moved. I did not tell them because of exactly what they are doing right now." There was a pause on the line. "I see. They are insisting this is a kidnapping. Your father is currently threatening to have Mr. Harlan arrested as an accomplice. They are demanding we ping your phone." "Please don't tell them where I am," I said. The fear spiked again, sharp and hot. "Please, you are an adult, Ms. Jenkins," the detective said. "You have committed no crime, and you are not a missing person. You have a right to your privacy. We are not going to disclose your location. She lowered her voice slightly. However, for what it is worth, your parents' behavior is concerning. Your father is quite aggressive. Do you want to file a report? No, I said. Not yet. Just please make them leave. I will handle it. Take care. Ms. Jenkins. The call ended. I leaned my forehead against the cool concrete wall of the stairwell. The police had validated me. A stranger with a badge had looked at my parents and seen not concern, but aggression. It was a small victory, but it felt massive. I could only imagine the scene that followed. Detective Miller walking back to Martin and Elaine, the look on Martin's face when an officer of the law told him to stand down. Sir, your daughter is not missing. We spoke to her. She moved out. She is safe, and she does not wish to be contacted. That was the moment the narrative cracked. Up until that second, they could play the role of the victim. They could be the grieving parents of a kidnapped girl. But the moment the police said she moved voluntarily, the script flipped. I wasn't taken. I fled. And if I fled, there had to be a reason. I went home early that day. I couldn't sit in the office anymore, back in my kitchen at Silverline Tower. I poured a glass of water and sat down to listen to the rest of the voicemail saga. After the police left, the messages changed. The panic evaporated, replaced by a cold, bewildered rage. Voicemail number 6, Martin, 4:15 p.m. You embarrassed us, he hissed. You had the police lecture me, a deacon. You made us look like fools in front of that slumlord Harlan. Where are you? You cannot hide from us. Ruby, we are your family. You will call us back immediately and apologize for this stunt. He didn't ask why I left. He didn't ask if I was happy. He only cared that I had broken the image. I had made a scene. Then came the report from the outside world. Around 6 o'clock. My phone pinged with a text from Miguel. He must have heard the commotion or seen the police cars. Miguel, hey, just saw your folks at the church. They stopped by after the cops left your old place. They were making a huge scene in the parking lot, crying to Father Thomas about how you've been led astray and vanished. Miguel, I was walking by. I couldn't help myself. I told them. She didn't vanish. Mr. Jenkins, she just wanted privacy. Maybe if you guys knocked once in a while instead of breaking in, she would have stayed. Miguel, your dad? Looked like he wanted to punch me. But Mrs. Gable and the choir ladies heard it. The vibe shifted. Ruby, people are starting to wonder. I smiled at the screen. A grim, tight smile. Miguel was a hero. The model parents' facade was built on the silence of the child. As long as I didn't speak, they could paint me as the problem. But by leaving so completely, by forcing them to involve the police and create a spectacle, I had inadvertently exposed the cracks in the foundation. I sat in the darkening kitchen, listening to the final voicemail of the day. It came at 8:30 p.m. It was Martin again, but the anger was gone. Or rather, it had been compressed into something denser, heavier. Ruby, he said. His voice sounded old, tired. We are home. We are sitting in the kitchen. Elaine hasn't stopped crying. She made your favorite pot roast, and it is sitting here cold. He paused. I could hear the clock ticking in the background, the grandfather clock in the hallway of the Maple Ridge house. If you are doing this to punish us, he said slowly, you have made your point. You have hurt us. Congratulations. You have proven you can be cruel. He sighed, a ragged sound. Just come home. We will forget this happened. We will forgive you. We will forgive you. The audacity took my breath away. After the cameras, the tracking, the invasion, the humiliation they were offering to forgive me. I whispered to the empty room, my voice steady and clear. No, I said. You still don't understand. This isn't punishment. Punishment is what you do to a child to make them obey. This is not about you. I looked at the phone. This is what it feels like when you no longer have a key to my life. This, I whispered, is a boundary. I didn't call them back. I didn't text. I turned the old iPhone off, placed it back in the drawer, and closed it. I walked into my living room. I turned on the lamp. I sat on my sofa, in my layout, and opened a book. My heart was aching, a dull throb of loss for parents I wished I had, versus the parents I actually got. But beneath the ache, there was peace. They were facing the void. For the first time in 27 years, they were reaching out to grab me and closing their hands around nothing but air. It took me 3 days to build the courage to dial the number. I sat at my new dining table in Silverline Tower. The room was dark, illuminated only by the city lights bleeding in through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the harsh blue glow of my laptop screen. On the table in front of me lay a single sheet of lined paper. It was my script. Dr. Harris had been very specific during our emergency session that morning. "Do not call to explain yourself," she had said, her voice firm. "Explanations are for people who have done something wrong. You have not done anything wrong. You are calling to inform. You are a CEO delivering a press release, not a defendant taking the stand." I looked at the notes I had written in black ink. 1. Do not apologize. 2. Do not give the address. 3. Stick to the facts. 4. If they yell, hang up. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm that made my hands shake. I placed my palms flat on the cool wood of the table. I took a deep breath, counting to 4 on the inhale, holding for 4, exhaling for 4. I picked up the old iPhone, the quarantine phone, from the drawer. I turned off the silent mode. It was 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. I knew exactly where they were. They would be in the den. Martin would be watching the news commentary. Elaine would be scrolling on her iPad, likely looking at photos of me from high school, fueling her martyrdom. I dialed the landline. It rang once. "Hello?" Elaine picked up so fast she must have been staring at the handset. Her voice was breathless, high-pitched, vibrating with a manic energy. "Mom," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, lower, flatter. It was the voice of a stranger. "Ruby!" The scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Oh God, Ruby!" "Where are you? Are you okay?" "We have been out of our minds. How could you do this to us? I haven't slept in 4 days. I thought you were dead in a ditch." "I am safe," I said. I looked at point number 1 on my list. "Do not apologize." "I am safe, and I am healthy." "Then tell us where you are," she sobbed. "We are coming to get you, right now. Just tell me the address. Baby, we will come and fix this." There was a scuffling sound on the line, a fumble of plastic against hard surfaces. Then, Martin's voice cut through the air like a serrated knife. "Put her on speaker, Elaine." It wasn't a request. It was a command. "Ruby," Martin barked, "you listen to me. This game ends now. You have embarrassed this family enough. You have the police involved. You have the neighbors talking. You tell me where you are this instant, or so help me God." "Why did you go into my apartment on Thursday?" I interrupted. I didn't shout. I didn't match his volume. I just dropped the question into the middle of his tirade like a stone into a pond. There was a pause, a beat of confusion. "What?" Martin sputtered. "The apartment at Riverside Commons," I said, reading from my script. "You went there on Thursday afternoon. You bullied the landlord into letting you in. Why? Elaine's voice came back, shrill and incredulous. "Because you weren't answering your phone. We thought you were hurt. We are your parents, Ruby. We were worried sick." "Worry is not a search warrant," I said. "Don't you give me that legal mumbo-jumbo," Martin snapped. "We had every right to check on you. When a child disappears, parents take action. If you hadn't been acting like a fugitive, we wouldn't have had to drive into the city." "I wasn't missing," I said. "I was at work, and you didn't just check on me. You tried to enter a home I no longer lived in. But let's talk about the time before that, and the time before that." I took a breath. My heart was still racing, but my voice was steadying. I was finding a rhythm. "Let's talk about the camera," I said. The silence that followed was different from the previous pauses. It was a sharp, intake-of-breath silence. "I don't know what you are talking about," Elaine said, but her voice wavered. It lacked the conviction of her earlier screams. The smoke detector, I clarified. The one above my bed. The one Dad installed 3 weeks ago. The one with the wide-angle lens and the SD card. That was for safety, Martin roared, his defense kicking in instantly. The crime rates in that neighborhood are through the roof. If someone broke in, we would need evidence. We were protecting you. You were watching me sleep, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I have the footage. Mom. Dead silence. I watched the clips, I continued, pressing the advantage. I watched you. Mom, I watched you walk into my apartment when I was at work. I watched you open my nightstand. I watched you take out my journal. I watched you read it. I watched you go through my underwear drawer. I waited. I let the accusation hang in the air between us, suspended over the telephone lines. This was the moment of truth. They could deny a feeling. They could deny a memory. They could not deny a video recording. Elaine's voice broke. It was a small, shattered sound. I was just looking for signs. I wanted to know if you were okay. You are so secretive. Ruby, you never tell me anything. I had to look. You violated me, I said. You turned my home into a fishbowl. You tracked my phone location. You commented on the time I came home because you were watching a dot on a map at 2 a.m. That isn't love. That is surveillance. We can't be too careful, Martin shouted. But there was a desperate edge to his anger now. He was losing ground. The world is dangerous. You should be grateful we care enough to watch. Do you know how many fathers don't even know their daughter's middle name? I know where you are every second of the day. Not anymore, I said. What? You don't know where I am now, I said. And you aren't going to. You can't do this, Martin said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening growl. You are my daughter. You belong with us. You cannot just vanish. I have already done it, I said. And here is how it is going to work from now on. I looked at point number 3. Stick to the facts. You will not get my new address, I stated. I have instructed my new building management that you are not allowed on the premises. If you try to find me, if you show up at my workplace, or if you harass my old landlord again, I will contact Detective Miller. Who? Elaine sniffed. The detective you spoke to, I said. The one who told you I was safe. I have her card. I have the SD card from the camera. I have a log of every time you entered my apartment without permission. If you force me, I will file a restraining order. You would sue your own father. Martin sounded scandalized. This is blackmail. You are blackmailing us with your own safety. No, I said. This isn't blackmail. This is a boundary, and boundaries have consequences. I felt a sudden rush of clarity. I had spent my life thinking that I was powerless against them, that their love was a tsunami I just had to drown in. But I wasn't drowning. I was standing on high ground. You have been breaking into my life since I was 14 years old, I said, my voice quiet but hard as a diamond. You took the door handle off my bedroom. You read my diaries. You tracked my phone. You let strangers sleep in my bed. You thought you owned me. You were wrong. Ruby, please. Elaine was weeping now. The soft, broken weeping of a woman who realizes her favorite toy has been taken away. We love you. We just love you so much. Don't shut us out. We will die without you. You won't die, I said. You will just have to learn to be parents instead of wardens. So that is it, Martin asked. You are cutting us off. You are an orphan now. That is up to you, I said. I looked at the final note on my script, the compromise. I am willing to maintain contact, I said. But on my terms, if you want to see me, we will meet in a public place, a coffee shop or a restaurant, not at your house, not at my apartment. Fine, Martin spat. Come home for dinner on Sunday. We will go to the steakhouse. No, I said. We will meet in the city, and I am bringing a friend. A friend? Elaine asked. Why can't we just be a family? Because I don't trust you not to scream at me, I said honestly. And I don't trust you not to try to follow me home, so I am bringing a third party, a neutral observer, If you act out, if you yell, or if you try to guilt trip me, the meeting ends and I leave." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear them processing this new reality. They were weighing their options. They could refuse and lose me completely, or they could agree and accept a version of me they couldn't control. "Fine," Martin grunted. "Next Sunday, noon, where I will text you the location," I said. "And Dad, if you try to follow me after lunch, the deal is off, forever." "We understand," Elaine whispered. "I hope so," I said. I didn't say, "I love you." The words were stuck in my throat, blocked by too much scar tissue. "Goodbye," I said. I pressed the red button to end the call. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone onto the table. It made a loud clatter. I slumped back in my chair. Exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 14. My shirt was stuck to my back with sweat. My head was pounding, but underneath the physical exhaustion, there was a strange, vibrating hum. It was pride. I had done it. I had stood in the fire and I hadn't burned. I picked up my new phone, the Android. I opened my messages and found the contact for Jenna. Jenna was Naomi's college roommate. She was a defense attorney who specialized in family law. Naomi had introduced us over drinks 2 days ago, and Jenna had listened to my story with the sharp, predatory grin of a woman who enjoyed destroying bullies. Me. "I did it. I called them." The response came back 20 seconds later. "Jenna, and did the walls fall down? Me no." But I set the terms. They agreed to meet. Public place. Next Sunday. Jenna, good. Do you still want backup? I looked at the empty chair across from me. I thought about Martin's rage. I thought about Elaine's tears. I knew that one phone call didn't erase 27 years of programming. If I went alone, they would find the cracks in my armor. They always did. Me. "Yes, please. I need you there. Jenna. I'll be there. I'll bring my resting bitch face. They won't know what hit them." I put the phone down and walked to the window. The city below was a grid of light and shadow. Somewhere out there, in the suburbs, 2 people were sitting in a house full of resentment, trying to figure out how to pick the lock of a door that no longer existed. They didn't know that I had changed the architecture. They didn't know that the girl they were coming to meet wasn't the daughter they raised. She was someone new, someone who had learned that the only way to keep a key is to never, ever give it away again. Harbor and Bean was a coffee shop designed for neutral ground. It had exposed brick walls, soft jazz playing at a volume that discouraged eavesdropping, and tables spaced far enough apart to allow for secrets. I arrived 20 minutes early. I chose a table near the window, not because I wanted to look out, but because I wanted to be visible to the street. I wanted the public nature of the space to be my shield. 3 tables away, Jenna sat behind her open laptop. She looked like any other freelancer working on a Sunday, sipping an iced Americano, but I knew she wasn't working. She was watching. We had established a signal if I touched my left ear. She would intervene. If things got physical, she would call the police. At 12 o'clock sharp, the bell above the door chimed. I watched them walk in. In my mind, Martin and Elaine were giants. They were looming figures who filled every room with their expectations and their judgments. But as they hesitated in the doorway, scanning the room, I was struck by a sudden, jarring realization. They looked small. Martin's shoulders, usually squared in a posture of authority, were slumped forward. His polo shirt looked slightly loose around the neck. Elaine looked exhausted. Her makeup was applied with a heavy hand, trying to cover the dark hollows beneath her eyes, but it only settled into the lines of her face. They didn't look like the terrifying wardens of my childhood. They looked like 2 aging people who hadn't slept in a week. They saw me. Elaine's hand went to her throat. They walked over, their steps tentative, as if they were walking on ice. They stood at the edge of the table, waiting. They were waiting for me to pull out the chair. They were waiting for permission. "Hello?" I said. I didn't stand up. "Ruby," Elaine breathed. She looked like she wanted to hug me, but something in my posture stopped her. Sit down, I said. They sat. The silence that settled over the table was thick and suffocating. A waiter came by, sensing the tension, and quickly took their orders for black coffee before retreating. You look thin, Elaine said. It was her default setting, criticism wrapped in concern. I am healthy, I replied. Let's not do the small talk. We are not here to catch up on the weather. Martin cleared his throat. He wrapped both hands around his water glass, his knuckles white. We just want to understand. Ruby, that is all. We want to know why you have cut us out like a tumor. I haven't cut you out, I said. I have relocated. There is a difference. I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out a black folder. It wasn't the flimsy notebook I used for my therapy homework. It was a professional presentation binder. I opened it and slid it across the table. What is this? Martin asked, looking at it with suspicion. It is a timeline, I said. Read it. They looked down. The first page was a spreadsheet. It listed every single unauthorized entry into my apartment at Riverside Commons over the last 6 months. It included dates, times, and the specific nature of the violation. October 4th, 2 p.m., unauthorized entry, moved furniture, November 12th, 1 p.m., unauthorized entry, left food, read mail, November 20th, unauthorized entry, guests slept in bed. I flipped the page. These are the photos from the SD card in the smoke detector, I said. Elaine gasped. There, in high-resolution glossy print, was a still image of her standing in my bedroom, holding my journal. Next to it was a photo of her rummaging through my drawer. And this, I pointed to the third document, is a copy of the text messages from Miguel, confirming you were there when I was at work. And here's the note Mr. Harlan wrote, confirming Dad lied about being the emergency contact to get the key. Martin stared at the papers. His face turned a mottled shade of red. Why are you showing us this? You think we don't know we were there? I am showing you this to establish the reality, I said, keeping my voice level. Because for years, you have told me that I am imagining things. You told me I was dramatic. You told me I was ungrateful. But this binder proves that I wasn't imagining anything. You were breaking the law. The law, Martin scoffed. He tried to summon his old bluster, but it sounded thin. We are your parents. Ruby, we are not criminals. You can't talk about us like we are strangers who robbed you. Actually, a voice said from behind them, that is exactly what she can do. Martin and Elaine spun around. Jenna was standing there. She wasn't smiling. She wore a sharp navy blazer and the expression of a woman who ate deacons for breakfast. Who are you? Martin demanded. My name is Jenna, she said, stepping up to the table. She didn't sit. She stood, forcing them to crane their necks up at her. I am a friend of Ruby's. I am also a criminal defense attorney. The color drained from Elaine's face. Your daughter asked me to join us, Jenna said calmly, because she wanted a witness, and to clarify a point of confusion. You see, the law does not excuse harassment just because it comes from family. Unauthorized surveillance is a felony. Stalking is a felony. If Ruby took this binder to a prosecutor today, you would not be looking at a family dispute. You would be looking at jail time. Jail? Elaine squeaked. For loving our daughter. For recording a woman in her bedroom without her consent. Jenna corrected. That is not love, ma'am. That is voyeurism. The word hung in the air. Ugly and undeniable. Elaine looked at the photos again. She looked at the image of herself invading my privacy, and then the dam broke. She didn't cry the way she usually did, the loud, performative sobbing meant to guilt-trip me. This was different. Her face crumbled. She put her head in her hands, and her shoulders shook with a silent, racking grief. I just wanted to know, she whispered. Know what? I asked. She looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks. I wanted to know you were still ours. When you moved to the city, when you got that job, you changed. You stopped needing us. You stopped asking for advice. I felt like you were erasing us. She took a shuddering breath. I told Aunt Sarah you were unstable. She confessed. I felt a sharp kick in my chest. What? I told the family you were having a mental breakdown, she sobbed. I told them that is why we had to go over there all the time. That is why we had to check on you. Because if I told them the truth that you just didn't want to see us, it would mean I was a bad mother. It would mean I failed. There it was. The naked, ugly truth. She hadn't invaded my privacy to protect me. She had done it to protect her own ego. She had painted me as crazy to the entire extended family just to justify her inability to let go. I looked at her. I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. I didn't feel the urge to say, "It's okay, Mom," because it wasn't okay. It was a betrayal of the highest order. I want to have parents, I said clearly. I do, but I do not want wardens, and I do not want to be a patient you have invented to make yourselves feel useful. I reached into the folder and pulled out the final document. It was a single sheet of paper. This is the path forward, I said. It is not a negotiation. Martin looked at the paper. What is this? It is a list of boundaries, I said. Read it. He picked it up, his hands shaking slightly. He read out loud, his voice barely a whisper. 1. No unannounced visits. 2. No keys to my residence, ever. 3. No tracking devices or location sharing. 4. No contacting my employer or landlord unless I am hospitalized and unconscious. 5. No discussing my mental health with extended family. He looked up. And if we make a mistake, read the bottom, I said. Violation of these terms, he read, will result in an immediate and permanent cessation of all contact. Furthermore, Ruby Jenkins reserves the right to pursue a restraining order based on the evidence collected in the attached dossier. Martin's face hardened. The old anger flared up. The instinct to dominate. You are threatening us, he spat. He made a move to rip the paper in half. Don't, Jenna said. Her voice was soft, but it stopped his hand in midair. Mr. Jenkins, Jenna said. Right now, that paper is just an agreement between family members. If you rip it up, you are signaling that you have no intention of respecting her boundaries. And if this ends up in family court, and I show the judge that you tore up a reasonable request for privacy after admitting to surveillance, it will look very, very bad for you. Martin froze. He looked at Jenna. He looked at the binder full of evidence. He looked at me. For the first time in his life, he realized that the money, the guilt, the I am your father card, none of it worked here. The currency had changed. Slowly, he lowered the paper. He smoothed it out on the table. He looked at Elaine. She was wiping her eyes with a napkin, looking defeated. We don't want to lose you, Elaine whispered. If this is what it takes, we will sign. I took a pen out of my bag. I placed it on the paper. Martin signed first. He pressed down so hard the pen almost tore the page. It was an angry signature, but it was there. Elaine signed next. Her hand was trembling so much the letters were shaky. We will try, Elaine said, looking at me with pleading eyes. We will try to do better. I took the paper back. I blew on the ink to dry it. I folded it and put it in my bag. I don't need you to try, I said. I need you to do it. I will believe it when I see it. For now, we are done. I stood up. Jenna stood up with me. Ruby, Martin said. He didn't look at me. He looked at his coffee cup. Are you happy? I paused. Was I happy? My heart was bruised. My family was shattered. I was standing in a coffee shop with a lawyer, treating my parents like defendants. I am free, I said. And for now, that is enough. I turned and walked out of the cafe. I didn't look back. I knew Jenna was right behind me, my shield until I reached the street. The taxi ride back to Silverline Tower was a blur. I watched the city pass by, feeling lighter with every block. The dossier was still in my bag, but it felt different now. It wasn't a weight. It was a closed case file. When I walked into the lobby of Silverline Tower, the late afternoon sun was turning the sky a deep, bruised violet. The light hit the glass walls of the lobby, making the whole space glow. Caleb was at the desk. He looked up as I approached. He saw my face, probably pale, probably looking like I had been through a war, and he didn't ask any questions. He just pressed the button to unlock the inner glass door. "Welcome home, Ms. Jenkins," he said. "Thank you, Caleb," I said, and I meant it. I rode the elevator to the 12th floor. I walked down the silent hallway. I put my key, the only key, into the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I stepped inside. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. The book was on the sofa. The coffee mug was in the sink. The air was still and cool. No one had been here. No one had moved the rug. No one had judged my life. I closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. Thud. I flipped the latch. Click. I leaned my back against the door and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. People think revenge is about screaming. They think it is about making the other person suffer, about burning their house down or ruining their reputation. But as I sat there in the quiet, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunset light, I realized the truth. I didn't want them to suffer. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted them to understand that I was real. Revenge, for me, was not an act of destruction. It was an act of reclamation. It was taking back the square footage of my own soul. It was the simple, terrifying act of saying, "This is my space. If you want to enter, you have to knock, you have to wait, and you have to accept that the answer might be no." I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Thank you for listening to this story. I am curious. Where are you tuning in from right now? A quiet apartment, a busy train, or maybe your childhood bedroom? Let me know in the comments below to connect with others. And please, subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach anyone who needs to hear that they hold the key to their own life.